All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Brian Z, CEO at Assembled. Thank you all for joining our webinar, sponsored by our good friends at Support Driven. It's very succinctly titled, Managing Support Challenges at Every Point of Scale. Today is definitely about our esteemed panelists and the broader Support Driven community, but first I want to tell you just a little bit more about Assembled. Assembled is a workforce management platform that helps modern support organizations get staffing right. We do this by fully automating your support forecasts, helping you build the optimal support schedule, and tracking real-time team performance. Our customers include Slack, Glossier, GoFundMe, and all of my lovely friends that you see up here on the virtual stage. If you want to learn more, go ahead and check us out at assembled.com. We're excited to hear from you and happy to help however we can, even if you're not immediately looking for a workforce or scheduling tool. But today, very happy to spare you the rest of the broader infomercial. We have a lot of talented, accomplished folks here that represent some of the most progressive support teams out there. Nick Martin from Harry's, Shelton Wirth from Daily Harvest, and Adrien Seldon from Stripe. I'll let them talk a little bit more about themselves in a bit, but just wanted to take a quick step back. If I were to summarize the point of today's discussion, scaling support is hard, and that's even before the tough reality we find ourselves in with COVID-19. So today is mostly meant to be group therapy, and along the way, hopefully you have a few actionable tips that you can take away. We know you're all really busy and definitely appreciate the time you've set aside to spend with us. All the questions have been directly sourced from the community. None of them will be shocking, as I'm sure we've all seen the same themes come up repeatedly in support-driven Slack channels. Without further ado, I'll let each of our guests introduce themselves. And as an opener question, maybe you can just tell us kind of the size of the support team that you're on right now, how big it was when you started, and maybe I'll just go in the order of the little tiles that I see. So Nick Martin, why don't you get us started?
Wow, thanks so much for the invite. Thanks for calling me talented and accomplished. You could say that a little louder. My mom in the other room really needs that. No, hey, thanks for everyone for listening, calling in. My name's Nick. I'm with Harry's. Harry's is a men's care and grooming brand. We started off with making shaving better for guys everywhere. And then obviously we decided that we needed to expand a little bit, and we're into more of a grooming portfolio right now, including body wash, bar soap, shampoo, and everything you can think of. And as a direct to consumer company, with the option of a recurring subscription, it was really important for us to have meaningful customer conversations, and take those and translate them into a better business, essentially. So we have meaningful conversations across 5 different channels. Most of our common contacts are around navigating our website, modifying or canceling your shave plan subscription, or resolving any sort of distribution related issue. And I've been with Harry's for 6 years. It started as an associate and then moved on to quality and training, and then moved on to people management. That's me.
Great, thanks, Nick. Shelton, you're up next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Shelton Wirth from Daily Harvest. Some people might be familiar with it. Our mission is we take care of food so that food can take care of you. We're also a subscription-based service. All frozen food that arrives to your doorstep frozen. The thing that we started with that I think people most know us for is our smoothies. But our collections have expanded far beyond that now. We just launched flatbreads. You have to try them. I had some for lunch today. They're amazing. Anyway, like Nick, I also started as a care associate on our care team about a little over 2 years ago. And back then we had, I think, 6 team members total in the CX department, which we actually call care. And then fast forward, now we have a full leadership team of a VP, a director, 5 people managers, 4 specialists, and then we have 32 care associates and 5 more on the way, like next week or the week after that. They can't get here soon enough. And just overall, I guess now I'm in a senior management role. So I do have 7 direct reports. And then my secondary role, I guess, is just partnering with our director on workforce management tasks and scheduling, volume forecasting, analytics surrounding productivity and workforce planning. And that's kind of how I got so connected with the Assembled crew.
Thanks, Shelton. Appreciate that. Adrien, you want to take us home?
Sure. My name is Adrien Seldon, and I am on the workforce team at Stripe, one of those big companies that a lot of people haven't heard of. The short and sweet answer is that we do payment processing, the back-end payment processing. Without going into a lot of the details, you've probably used us and just don't know it because of the amount of actual customization that has been offered. Been with Stripe for, it will be 3 years in July. And in Stripe time, that's probably one of, an old timer around then. I actually am the now longest tenured person on the workforce team, which is kind of crazy being there less than 3 years. I've been doing the same role on paper by title for the 3 years, but when I started, there was only one person doing workforce. So I doubled the team size, and now there are 5 of us. So still not a lot, but decent percentage growth there. We have our support teams. We have some in-house, and then we have most of it outsourced, and that is a team of getting close to about 1,500 agents across multiple different sites and all around the globe right now. So quite an interesting environment, and we support 3 channels: email, phone, and chat on all those sites.
Great, thanks, Adrien. Just to start off, I was hoping to maybe double click a little bit into your backgrounds a little bit more. So if you think about your own journey and your current team, I'd love to maybe have each of you describe, and I promise, Nick, I won't force you to answer all these questions, but for this one, would love to hear from each of you a little bit, just how you define maybe the different chapters of your support team's growth, and perhaps a few of the challenges that you met and addressed along the way.
Yeah. So when I joined, I was number 30 or 40 for staff in general, and for CX staff, there was about 3 or 4 of us. And I think that chapter is like pretty well defined as everyone around a table. So essentially your quality is defined by turning to someone next to each other and matching each other's personalities and matching each other's tone, and the schedule can be turned on and off at any moment in time, and you kind of just scrappy make it happen. And then quickly what happened was Harry's is considered a hyper growth, startup. And quickly what happened is we realized that we needed to expand faster than we were able to do as a team. And we also didn't have the perfect handling on our forecasting. Specifically, we saw some pretty large spikes at random times, but then also expected times. So an expected time would be around Father's Day, where maybe everyone's getting a nice gift set for their father, which makes sense for a male grooming company. So what we needed to do then was we actually moved from in-house around the table to, we went to a BPO. We had a third party for about a year and a half. And that worked pretty well. They had a lot of pros, a lot of advantages that you can, guess, where the ability to ramp up and ramp down, move people around that are qualified in some of the softer skills for customer care and customer service through your clients and different clients, the ability to hire for you and everything. But then we also saw some cons where when it came to attrition specifically, and we weren't able to maintain our quality as tight as we really wanted to. So the third kind of phase of the CX growth was actually getting a better handle on our forecasting and then bringing everything back in-house. And by in-house, we actually brought everything back to Harry's, but we actually decided to do a remote and in-house part-time, full-time sort of fully distributed workforce. So that's kind of what we've been at for about a year and a half. It's been working successfully, but it's certainly a challenge. Again, pros and cons as well. Pro being we have a much better control over the employee experience, which is really important to me because I think it translates into the customer experience very directly. A con being you're always hiring, like you're just always hiring. So if you haven't thought about how you're going to get that recruiting and interviewing and hiring help, or have a really good strategy for that, it's pretty risky to bring everything 100% in-house.
Got it. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, there's 2 themes that will be coming up later in the questions. I think one is really around this challenge of going from everybody in the same room and kind of needing more complexity, more organizational processes and all that kind of stuff. And the second is we'll probably come back to you and ask you a little bit more about that journey going from outsourced to in-house. Shelton, you want to come up?
Yeah, I'll go next. Mine's not quite as long. I have been with Daily Harvest, like I said, a little over 2 years. My full time there, I've been on the care team. And I guess when I'm thinking about chapters, mine are kind of defined by like the different leadership of the care team and like the transition we went through with that. And then also how it relates to different channel expansion, which I know is a topic we also have coming up later. But so in the beginning, our communication with customers was very limited. We were obviously emailing with customers. That was our most popular channel. And we had just launched live chat. There were no inbound phones. Everything was a scheduled phone call. So customers had to contact us and set up a time for us to call them back. So kind of like Nick said, just it felt very scrappy, and there were 6 people on the team. So it was just like trying to spread out, you know, our efforts over a 12-hour period, but we still technically only had like an 8-hour business hour time frame. And then maybe a middle chapter in that would be going from less scrappy. The team was about 3 times the size, so maybe around 20 people total. So, and then kind of figuring out more about like our standard operating procedures and some of our like quality around conversations that we're having with customers. So implementing like a QA program within the care team, that was like a huge step in itself. And we kind of redid the rubric a couple times, and we're really like cracking down, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, on like making sure that our quality was definitely there and making sure that like our voice was unified and figuring out what that voice was for across the care team when we're talking to customers. And then fast forward to today, we now have 5 channels. So we have inbound phones now, live chat and email still. We also have SMS, which our customers love, and then a little bit of social media within our team as well. And we now have a VP of our team, and like we've just kind of taken it from a regular customer service team to a world-class customer service team. And we really define ourselves as that every day, implementing a lot more metrics into our agent feedback, and then still continuing with the quality scoring across all those channels.
Great. Yeah, the 2 themes there that we'll definitely be touching on, as you mentioned, is kind of expanding channel coverage, but also, the challenges of scaling, response times and quality as a team grows, usually through metrics. But yeah, thanks, Shelton.
Yep.
Great. And so as I was saying, I started at Stripe. It'll be almost 3 years now. And coming in, the team was definitely scrappy. You've got one person doing everything in workforce. I came into a department where there was really a just kind of keep your head above water, a lot of spreadsheets where data was manually entered in. The formulas hadn't even been built out yet. And that was really like the first page there, which is very different from where I'd come from before, which was highly enterprise level. So going from there, not intentionally, but about every summer at Stripe, we have some big change. And then that kind of corresponds with what the company's doing and then what workforce is doing. So 2 summers ago, we launched our live channel support, moving away from email. And at the same time, we were able to bring on an additional member to the team. And we moved into much larger interconnected data sets, actually tracking more in depth with our vendors on their delivery versus our order. And then because we had live channels, we moved to actually starting to the base delivery of actual needs by interval instead of just by the overall weekly needs. Fast forward a year again to last summer, and we bifurcated our support into our more like premium support and then kind of the rest of the support elsewhere. It's about 75-25 split. We were also able to hire on more people, had some leadership change, and in that time we had leaned a lot more heavily into Assembled. And then some of the features that we're still working on with just getting security review and getting data moved around, we started to build out in database tables and kind of feed those across. And I'd say the chapter that we're at now is moving from that, yes, it's been scrappy. We've had to get things stood up, especially in the last couple of months. We've really had to get things like remote work stood up. But now we have to move more towards the more enterprise level of, can we make sure we're getting billed exactly correctly from our vendors? We're ensuring every hour that we're asking for is being delivered upon or not delivered upon, why that's happening, where those misses, what's that causing us as a miss downstream, and being able to wrap that up into a much more comprehensive package with the vendors.
Great. Thanks, Adrien. I think Adrien brings a unique perspective to this conversation because he's been in workforce management effectively forever. And also I think Stripe is definitely at a further point of scale, but I think we're hoping that there's going to be a good discussion to be had, sort of tying the dots between different points there. So yeah, look, I think all those themes tie really nicely into the questions that we received from the support-driven community. My first question was going to be about, support channels and how those evolved over time for you all. I think Shelton and Adrien, you've basically kind of given me the answer. Maybe Nick, you can kind of fill in the blanks, sort of how Harry's has thought about channels all the way.
Yeah, from the start, we based our channels on our values. I think starting with your company values is always a good foundation for making decisions. So we launched on phones, which I know is like a regular question that especially a lot of the more tech-based companies deal with. Do we want to open up a phone line? It's very expensive. It takes a lot of time, all that stuff like that. We started on phones from day one because it was a value that Jeff and Andy had. I would say one of the channel launches that we didn't do very well was about a year later, we thought, hey, chat's really cool. We want to be innovative. Let's launch chat. But we forgot to do, hey, what do we consider success? What do we consider an anti-goal? How are we measuring this? And, after rolling with it for maybe 2 years, we did a quick analysis and it was more incremental than it was in terms of deflection or in transactional or anything that was good for us. So we've done both. My recommendation for anyone looking into new channels, I guess it depends on your type of business, but I am on the side of the coin that says you do not need to be everywhere. You need to be better at where you are to start, and then you move everywhere. That's just me though.
Yeah, interesting follow-up question. I mean, because naively to me, I would think that, the harder transition in might be from chat to phone because you don't have the same ability to kind of prepare for responses, right, as an agent, right? So I'm curious to maybe hear you talk a little bit more about what those challenges were that you didn't expect as you made that transition.
Yeah, I just don't think that we had this idea that all of these people that were calling in would have chatted, or like 10% would have been on the chat if we launched chat. And what we saw was, there was 300 people that wanted to chat, but that didn't decrease the amount of phone calls that were coming in. We also did a poor job connecting it through the checkout. Like, is this connected through checkout? And are we just creating ourselves more work here? That was, we shut it down right now. We're thinking about doing it right again. We're testing it again in the UK right now. But for the moment, I think the channel's not working for us.
Got it. Cool. I think that's actually a pretty good transition to the next question, which I think a lot of tech companies especially, they start off on email because that's just the obvious thing to do, right? And email has its own very unique characteristics about writing quality and all that kind of stuff. Kind of curious to hear from this group that started off in email, maybe transition into live channels. Like, any advice for people who are kind of thinking about making that same jump from your own experiences?
Yeah, I can talk to that. Similar to how a lot of other companies have started. Stripe started off on email. A lot of that was driven from the fact that when the product first launched, there was a lot more, as it wasn't widely as known, you have a lot more of just the technical details. The implementation does take that technical side. And so that's a little bit harder to relay over chat. It's not impossible because you can still read things by chat, but even more hard to relay over phone when you're trying to walk through how to go through your lines of code or something. You're going to end up following up with an email anyways, right? So that's another channel to just kind of add to that. When we did decide to move to live channels, I think one of the best ideas that we implemented successfully is that the live channels are behind your login wall. So that, and just to give some example before, I previously worked at T-Mobile, and everybody knows you can call 611 or you can go to T-Mobile's website and just dial the number and connect there. With Stripe, you actually have to log in, and this adds the ability to authenticate with your two-factor authentication, but it also kind of blocks those just, hey, I'm going to call Stripe or I'm going to shoot them a message for something that I could probably get maybe on my self-help, or if I'm just having like a bad day. You get those sometimes too. And that was a really big one to implement. It helped out with not having volume just absolutely kind of explode from people who maybe just don't want to do email, but still need to be supported via email. I will say that as you transition to live channels, a real easy trap to fall into is that you may be assuming that it's going to eat away a lot of the email volume. So you can say, all right, I can take X% of email, assume that it's going to be X% of live channel volume, and then reduce my email staffing. You're probably not going to see that. There should be some cannibalization of the volume to the other channels, but it's not going to be a one-for-one. And even though those channels are usually more efficient in their handle times and what they're doing, as you open those avenues up, just kind of think of them as more ways to get a hold of you, which is great, but not really going to be a reduction in overall volume.
And Adrien, I think one of the biggest advantages you just mentioned was that behind the login wall, you have an authentication already happening, right? So you're skipping like a lot of the time that we need to do without a login wall to go through basic security procedures.
Yes, exactly. And that also removes any sort of IVR on the Stripe side,
Wow.
which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest way that you're going to get customer dissatisfaction. Yep. There's pros and cons. Maybe putting up a deflection message if you had to might be a little bit more difficult, or you have to put it on like the customer's splash page when they log in. But you also don't have to say press 1 for your account, yada, yada. We have a drop-down menu you can select from a preset set of topics or type in your own. And there's some machine learning to try to connect to agents that have had that more specific training, whichever channel you choose to use.
Very cool.
Shelton, I know that Daily Harvest kind of went through a similar transition. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. That's so interesting about the login wall with Stripe. We actually haven't played around with that idea, and now I'm like kind of thinking of it. Maybe I should take that back to my team. We do something similar though. I mean, people who aren't already customers or just prospects, like we definitely want to talk to them as well. So we kind of, once you go to our help page, we take you through the FAQs first. And then if you still, it says like still want help, then it takes you to like all of our different methods of contact on the contact page. So I just wanted to add that tidbit in there, but I guess I'll speak a little bit to when we launched SMS and then also when we launched inbound phones. So both were a little bit different. I think SMS for us was very quick and streamlined. So there wasn't like, obviously there was a lot of tech work that went into the back end of making SMS possible just from the website and through Customer, which is our CRM platform. But in terms of like training the team, it appears very, very much the same as live chat within Customer. So training the team on that, we kind of just like explained that to them, answered a few questions, and then we made it live. And then that channel actually blew up, and that channel did take over a large percentage of our customers that were reaching out via email mostly. People were still using live chat just as much as they always did. But I would say, I don't know if I have any particular advice for launching SMS. It was very seamless for us. Inbound phones was totally different. It was a huge process. I think we spent 6 or 8 weeks in advance, everyone on the leadership team, and we have a dedicated product manager on our product team that works with the care team. And we set up a specific project plan, and everyone on that team had like a piece of the puzzle that we had to do either in the back end or with training the team, shadowing, like learning about different, like I'll go back to the brand language, like that's a huge thing, and our brand team was very involved in that. So it involved so many different pieces through the company, and it was pretty successful. I think like if I would do something differently, or if I was going to give a piece of advice, we delayed a few steps in the process. So it ended up delaying our launch date by about 2 weeks. But we ended up using that 2-week delay to do a soft launch, which was just minimal hours for like those 2 weeks of having the live phone, like the inbound phones live. So I think that was actually, in retrospect, very beneficial for the team to just get used to it on a very gradual level before we like went full blown live phones, 12 hours a day. So.
Got it. Yeah, a lot of similar themes I'm hearing. It sounds like one is just kind of be deliberate about the principles that you have about launching the channel, whether it be, just a customer experience principle, whether it be more for sales or whether it's more for kind of account support. And the second is, I guess, unfortunately, don't expect the rest of your support volume to disappear when you launch a new channel. Probably that could be the book of support ops, is don't expect it to have as big an impact as you expect it to. But yeah, thanks for that. I guess relatedly, social is a channel that I think is kind of new and increasingly important, especially for a lot of folks that have consumer users. I know there's a lot of, as Shelton described it, kind of overlap between that and PR and marketing. Curious to hear if anyone has any thoughts on best practice for managing social.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. We, our brand team is very involved. Brand marketing is very involved in the social channels for us. We do have a dedicated community team who handles pretty much all of the social media presence, specifically Instagram, but we also use Facebook and a little bit of Twitter. You'd be surprised, like people are still tweeting, but it's less like customer service related and more just them wanting to talk about Daily Harvest or post their pictures of their food or whatever. But Instagram is a huge one, and our brand team handles anything that's interactions in comments or just general like likes, or when people post something and tag us. That's all done on the marketing side. And they usually respond with something like very brandish and like emojis, fun stuff like that. And they're trained very specifically to handle those in a certain way. Anything that gets commented in a public comment or a post that's public, the brand team will respond and ask that the customer DM us, and then those messages get flagged for a few specific members on our team who are also trained by the brand team on social, and then they handle those. So it's like, my order was damaged, or I want to cancel my account, just anything customer service related that our team handles typically, then those get flagged for us. So we have a very small part in the social channels, and it's like a very specific division of who handles what. But it is still nice that we get, to see that side of our customer communication. And I will say everything except for Instagram is integrated with customer. So I think that's something that we're always going to see. Instagram just keeps separate, so they handle those right on their phone. And then Facebook messages, Twitter DMs all come in through customers. So it's the same workflow as basically answering an email.
Right. That unified inbox must be nice. Nick, I see you on mute. Do you have anything here? Or?
Yeah, no, I'm just like, because this is a workforce management conversation, I thought, we also reply, our CX team handles a lot of the social responsiveness and take it to DM and everything along those lines. I guess what I've always struggled with is really planning, my FTE allocation for 7 different social channels that are all drastically different. Like I can get an average handle time on my email like that, and on voice and type of contact and everything. And then when I go into that social world, I hit my head against my desk 3 times and go 1 FTE and then walk away. So Shelton or Adrien.
Sounds very rigorous and sophisticated.
I totally agree. It's like a channel that we're like not even measuring metrics for, because it's so hard and they're in so many different places, like Nick said. And I think I actually met with Jen from Assembled on this a couple of weeks ago, and she was asking a lot of questions about like, how do you schedule them? How do you think about scheduling? What times of day? How many hours a day? That kind of stuff. And I was like, we kind of just guess, and then we take feedback from the agents that are actually working it, and then adjust it based on that. Like if they're not able to get the workload done, which is what's happening recently, we're adding social hours to our couple social people's schedules because the volume has increased, but we don't have a very good way of measuring it, so it's very like unofficial at this point.
But I think that's also, I mean, that is a tool that we have, which is listen to the people that are doing the actual work and adjust accordingly. Like that's a tool that we can't forget in our workforce management.
For sure. You know, I think you guys underlined a challenge with social, which is just the underlying metrics aren't quite there yet. Just to give a little plug, we did just add social as a channel to Assembled, and I think we're kind of early on in our journey of helping our users. Thank you very much. Yeah, sort of workforce manage against an environment that includes social among the other 10,000 channels that I'm sure are going to be launched in the next couple of years. So, cool. The next adjacent question that we heard a bit from the submissions were about expanding to new time zones and geographies. Particularly for live channels. I'm kind of curious to hear about folks' experience expanding hours of operations. I know that Stripe has made it all the way to 24/7 phone and chat coverage, but for anybody who has any comments there, kind of curious to hear about that journey.
Yeah, I can talk about Stripe going 24/7, and I like how you said, you know, we've made it there versus like we were kind of pushed to go there. One of those things I forgot to mention with having our contact channel submissions behind your login wall is that we can feature turn on or off who gets those pushed to them, and then say, we want to roll out phone and chat, and literally say only to North America or only to like this specific area. So then we were able to very, very specifically say when we're going to roll this out. And for the most part, it's still a lot of English help there, but to where it's going around the world, which allowed in Workforce us the ability to get ahead of that and actually plan for it. That's been like the nicest thing I've ever really seen from a support team, kind of setting up that, which has been awesome. When expanding out to those different time zones, a big important one that is to try to, if you are going to outsource, try to grab vendors that are in the general region, even if you're not going for language support. Just the kind of production you're going to get out of people who are working maybe more of their normal time zones is going to be a higher quality versus having everything US based and making people work overnight. You're just not going to get the same performance out of most of them. Some people are night owls, you'll get that out of them. And then just be ready to overstaff. I know it sounds a little weird, but overstaff during those low time frames. As you're going through and the rule of kind of one person per every interval that you need. When you go overnight and you have very little data to go off of, I mean, if you're working on maybe emails when they came in to try to relay that to phones or chats, you'll need to go to those one or two or possibly even three people for each of those intervals and be okay with that to start. From my point of view, I'd much rather, for a certain amount of time, kind of overstaff and be able to absorb any of those little peaks and valleys. One call to three calls, one interval's one interval's three, it's a 300% increase. So it's a massive amount of adjustment that you can have overnight with just a little bit of volume change. And then it still allows those people overnight to feel as though they are being treated the same as their daytime peers, and they can take that time off because there are going to be other people working. They can go to those trainings. They don't need to focus on being, oh my gosh, I'm the only one. If I'm not off this call in 2 minutes, the next ones are just going to back up. So in that case, it is a little bit of a good idea to just take the hit if you can and prepare for the worst situation.
Thanks, Adrien.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else on expanding business hours?
We haven't done it very well. And I think what we're looking for right now is, and maybe Adrien, you can shed some light on this, is what was the catalyst? You mentioned like it was a need or a push to do it. And right now we're doing a lot of annual customer preference like collection to see what our customers want and kind of make moves on that. So if we're deciding between rolling out a new channel and rolling out expanded hours, for example, we can't do both right now, let's just be honest. So we're going to pick one of them and how to make that decision. Were you getting a lot of push from here or here? Or like, what did that look like?
Yeah, a big one, and that may be a little bit more just on the Stripe side for this call, is that the payments marketplace is pretty competitive, and so the need to expand to all these other countries that maybe have a lot of revenue to be gained, or countries that have just never been served by a nice payment processor. So once you start to think outside the US of that's when you really need to push that right away. And that's what really the driving force was to go to there. We have offices around the globe as well. So we were lucky enough to have some support staff that was in-house that could kind of help field some of those questions and are generally close enough to support centers to help out there as well. But yeah, just making sure that everywhere that you are expanding to is being covered by the time zones, but there are also some things to consider as you expand out with just local, just customs and how things are handled in conversation, that if you're going to get people that can support in that area, it makes the transition just a little bit smoother. Even if they're speaking English, just a little bit more easy during that transaction. As for adding another channel versus doing that, I think that's, yeah, it is what it is for each company. It's hard to put a generic rule to that.
My name is Asif. I'm from PerfectQ. I run a support center out of Central Europe. Me and my wife run that whole team over there. So what we do is when we work with our clients, we make sure when we are expanding the hours, we always have an overlap of a couple of hours so that the remote team, it feels that it's part of the local team over here in North America. So that gives them a connecting point. And it's also very good when it comes to knowledge transfer, because at that point, you want to make sure any changes are being communicated to the other remote teams as well. So we always tell our clients, hey, always have a 1 or 2 hour overlap with the other team. It's not a huge cost, but at the same time, the benefits are exponential from that perspective, really.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think there's just a broader point there around just like making new offices feel included. I know that was always a challenge as you feel the pressure of international expansion. So I think, overlapping hours of operations is a good way to sort of achieve that.
Correct.
Cool. Let's see what's up next. Switching gears. We've all obviously had to adjust to the reality that is COVID-19. I'm just kind of curious to hear how things have been going for you all.
I'll start. It's crazy. Our business exploded. Our volume exploded. It's a great problem to have, but we're just kind of drowning in all of our channels right now. So that's been a lot of my last few weeks of strategizing how to schedule differently, what hours can we change people's schedules to and from, but we always try to keep things to agent preferences, but now we're looking at expanding outside of that and kind of pushing our employees to work different times. We also, something I think that's unique to us is that we don't, or we never have in the past, really scheduled for email hours. We just schedule for our live channels, so phones, chat, SMS, and then social, that's a special case, which I talked about. But, and then email was always just handled kind of in the background of these other live channels when they weren't on a live contact. And now we are completely full on every live channel at all times, and even starting to get behind on them. So we've had to start implementing email hours. It's not quite structured yet. We kind of just do it through the day as we go to see okay, phones are a little bit slow. Let's move a bunch of people into email right now, that kind of thing. So that's a struggle that we've had that we weren't quite prepared for going into the whole work from home time. And we are doing food delivery and people are relying on that right now. So we've just had a ton of customer reach out. So that's one thing. And then I'll also speak to the employee experience a little bit. Our headquarters is in New York, and we do have a small portion of the care team in New York, but then we also have our satellite office in Salt Lake City, and the majority of the care team is out there. And that team is mostly remote already. So we've this has been a really easy transition for our team as individual people, but also as a team, because our meetings every week are already over video chat, and a lot of my one-on-ones are already over video chat. So I think out of our whole company, our team was probably the most well-adjusted to like having to go fully remote. So that's been nice. I think our biggest thing is just we're finding ourselves working a lot more now because there's nothing else to do because you're just home, but also combined with like our huge volume surge.
Thanks for sharing, Shelton. I'm sure everyone on this line can probably empathize with that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar, Harry's. Half of our team has been remote for the last year, so we borrowed a lot of their best practices when we moved to working from home, and we are also looking at incoming volume spiking and making some tough trade-offs on what that looks like, so we can handle that. And I know Adrien mentioned the IVR earlier. We have started to set expectations with our customers when it comes to delivery times right now. We put up FAQ, auto replies, IVR, out of office voicemails, everything like that would be saying something along the lines of, which is true, like, hey, we're safeguarding, our distribution employees. So that might affect your delivery time by a couple more days. And that is definitely a worse customer experience, but it's a trade-off that we're making right now to just be honest up front so we can handle the incoming volume that we're seeing right now. And I would say for Assembled, when we've started to do those things, we saw a reaction happen in our the amount of calls that were coming through that we're abandoning in that IVR or abandoning in a different route. So we used the forecast multiplier, turned it down to what percentage I saw on that test day. So then when we could look at our actual reality of how many people we needed to staff specifically on phone channel, we had a pretty good reflection of that moving forward. Plug.
I appreciate you, brother.
Very similar things that have happened at Stripe as well. One of the big things that you guys have said is that teams in this day and age, especially on like the smaller side of companies, are kind of already a lot of remote. There's two of my peers that work in the Seattle office and then two more in Dublin, and we interface kind of all over the globe anyways. So specifically for the team, there wasn't a big adjustment. For our vendors, and I have to give a lot of kudos to my vendor management side of the house, is we went in a matter of a couple days from a minimum viable support. We said we could probably do 400 or so agents that meet some criteria that can work from home. And within the next week or so, it was actually, this is a big thing. We now have every single agent, except for maybe like one or two that's on a performance plan, take their equipment home, regardless of their country. And this goes from, Oregon to Colombia. They take their equipment home and they are going to work from home and be remotely monitored. So what that actually has done for us is we haven't actually slowed down our response times, and we've seen volume impacts increase by about 20% or so and been able to absorb that. So for the customer experience, there's very little knowledge that these people are not actually in the office anymore. And that's been a big goal. We didn't think we were going to be able to do that, and we are able to. The double edge of that sword is it's great. We can continue to do this. So a lot of the other projects that we're going through to just kind of change how we were going to do support are still happening. And then now you've got to balance that with remote teams, with teams that may not be able to hire as fast, because onboarding people in a purely remote environment is another challenge. Mm-hmm. So it's we did so good. Let's now continue to do better.
Yeah. It sounds like, I don't know if it's a luxury, but it is when you have more people, I think it's probably easier to move folks around to sort of handle natural spikes versus, I listen to Shelton and like, you have to kind of build in email time just to make sure kind of like the relative experience is maintained. Just to like meditate on that a little bit. So like, are there any other tips you'd share for kind of just like spikes in volume that you see? Like, what's the best way to kind of handle that?
Yeah, we've discussed this as we meet kind of weekly and go over things. One of the principles that I've done on Workforce here at Stripe is that we always build in a little bit of a buffer to our staffing plans in general, and this can be 5 to 10%. Then when I go through making sure that the actual occupancy assumptions for our agents is not set terribly high. Obviously, you want to cause burnout, but that also gives us some buffer. And then when we talk with the vendors, we're moving to 100% interval adherence, which is going to naturally have them bring on some overstaffing. They may increase their shrinkage to come down and meet every single one of our intervals, but they're going to have to overstaff some and bring that down. All those together were the perfect anti-storm to let us absorb this right away, which has been great. However, there's a limit to that. And so now we have to go through and see, all right, we've been able to absorb this 20% relatively easily. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like this is just going to be a short-term 20%. There's a lot of the world is not going to go back to how it was before in a short amount of time. So are there things that we can do to, without just having to speed up hiring, but are there things that we can systemically put in place to speed it up? Or do we have to go down that route of maybe lowering some of our service offering times to accommodate that?
Right. So just to add a little bit, if you are looking into remote teams, especially when you're expanding into different time zones, different parts of the world, it's not only the infrastructure you are looking from an organizational perspective. Since everyone is going remote and working from home, you have to look at the infrastructure that is available to the residents over there. If the phone lines are capable of supporting your requirements, also the electrical grid structure in those countries, especially for the residential, because what happens a lot of time, these offices are centered in free trade zones, so they have all the facilities, but the minute you walk out of those free trade zones, you have all these challenges and issues with remote teams. So you have to be very careful with the COVID-19, how these companies are taking this work outside and how it's going to impact your service level and quality.
Yeah, great points.
Great. Anything else on spikes in volume? So just to cheat a little bit, I think the last time we talked about spikes in volume, it kind of went in the direction of being able to cross-train folks into being able to handle more of the places that might be more impacted. So assuming that was one of the answers that was just given, I was hoping that we could talk about specialization a little bit and what that journey has been like for folks.
So Harry's CX is a little bit more Swiss Army knife. We definitely have some specializations. They're pretty small. I think our overall philosophy is actually we have 4 team members that are associates that are hired into sort of a team lead position that 10 hours a week they spend in a cross-functional relationship doing project work, but also just managing that relationship and making sure that our CX team is getting information from them and prepared and making sure that the voice of the customer from us is getting to them. So a good example would be our marketing team who might be sending out emails on a regular basis. We need to give them the reaction to said emails. They need to let us know when said emails are being sent. And that's across 4 different huge departments. And those 4 individuals that are on my team that work 30 hours a week directly talking to customers actually spend the next 10 hours a week making sure that our team can handle all the specialized different things that will be coming through. So we have a luxury to be a little less specialized because we spend a lot of time in the training and development through those touch base.
Cool.
For Daily Harvest, for our care team, I think our specializations are more, it's less pointed people that we have, but it's more about creating specialized search buckets within customers. So based on keywords that customers use when they write in, we kind of organize all of those automatically into different search buckets. So that really helps during like high volume, surge in volume times that like we're having now. So we can just kind of assign one specific person, whoever it is, someone typically with like higher performance or the ones that are faster to those buckets. And then they're able to just like kind of flow through a bunch of the same issues all at once. So it's more like a muscle memory type thing. And they're able to use more macro responses during that. So it just goes a little bit faster versus like having tickets fed to you that are all different topics. So that's one thing we do. Another thing,
Just to clarify, does that mean that you kind of spin up sort of temporary specializations that kind of just respond to different, got it?
Yeah, exactly. It's not all the time. I mean, typically we want everyone we want their status to be available in the channel that they're in and let the system do the work of like assigning the tickets. This is a very manual process. So they have to, like, it has to be employees that we trust and that, like I said, the higher potential performers that can go in and manually do this work and like get through it efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I was about to jump on was we've actually gotten a lot of help from other departments in the company. And this is, again, not normal, but just during like a very high volume time like this, they were actually coming to us, like begging to help. They're like, we know you're like slammed right now and just let us help, give us a login to customer. And they also want to talk to the customers. So it's kind of like a win-win from both perspectives. They're getting a lot of insight for their own jobs, but then they're also helping us with some of our volume. So we kind of put everyone through a crash course of training for care. And a lot of those people also work those specialized search buckets as well. So yeah, we're doing a little bit of it.
Sounds like you all have a good culture for customer support if you have other folks who can help out. So
yeah.
Anyone else on that one? All right, I know we're actually running, this has been a great conversation so far, but I did want to save some time for questions from the audience. So feel free to weigh in on the Zoom chat. I've also buffered a few from the initial sort of webinar submission form. So if nobody has questions there, I can just revert back to the submission form. Let me get one to, Diane is asking about more tips for managing virtual environments versus in-office environments. And I suspect that this question is specifically for environments that are newly virtual. I'll just plug, Jen Ong, who's an awesome team member at Assembled, has created a 3-part series on this. So that can be a nice take-home goodie. But for the folks in this room, would be curious to kind of hear how that transition has been going. What tools are being used? That's what Diane's asking.
For our team, I mentioned we are already, like during normal times, we're already doing a lot of remote, I guess, / virtual work. I think my main tips would be, I guess I'll say tool-wise, we use Zoom, we use another video chat platform called daily.co. That's a free one. And then Slack is huge. I think everyone probably uses Slack or a similar chat platform, but we rely so heavily on it. So one of the ways that we organize Slack is we have a couple different channels that include the whole team, but they're divided up based on like topics. So we have one called Care Answers, where you just ask questions and that goes to like the manager on duty or, whoever else wants to chime in and help. But that's specifically, it's almost like a reference channel. So you can also go back and search if you have the same question for later. Then we have another one that's just care. And that's kind of like our goof off channel where we just, if we want to like socialize with the team or if anybody has like, whatever life stuff they want to talk about. We also give updates like, I'm going out for lunch now, I'm back from lunch. Those updates go there. So it's the full team in all the channels, but we separate it based on categories so that they're easily searchable and then easy to follow, or you can ignore the one that, is more of less important, I guess. And then another thing is, I guess, our meeting schedule. So that's really important to us as a leadership team. We do a full team meeting every other week with our whole department. And I guess just to speak about scheduling on that for a minute, instead of pulling everyone out of live channels, I created what we call the meeting rotation. So it's usually between 5 and 7 people sitting out of the meeting and they man the channels while the rest of the team and all the leaders are in the meeting, and it's 1 hour. And we always record our meetings and then assign them a time later to go back and watch the meeting. So it's tough because I hate having people to miss the meeting live, but that's kind of our workaround for still allowing them to watch it. And then every associate meets with their manager for a one-on-one every week. And I think personally, part of my leadership style is just that not canceling any meetings, not rescheduling it, sticking to that schedule, and making sure the agent knows that, you know, they have this time that they can rely on weekly to be with me or with their manager or whatever case. And I think just sticking to that schedule is so important, especially for team morale.
Got it. Thanks, Shelton.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else there?
Yeah, I think I covered this before too, just how with Stripe we do use BPOs, we vendorize just about everything. The team was already so virtual. We were kind of in that position where, except for the physical location, a lot of the things were already the same. The agents, they use Chrome boxes, very lightweight, so it's just physically moving the device itself. We do actually have our BPO vendors in Slack channels where they can talk to each other to bounce ideas off of. There are already in those channels Stripe SMEs from the internal teams that are in there. So with all this going on, I might have somebody who is in Canada, that's the Stripe that covers my particular line of business, and they're already in Slack and everything virtual with these other vendors trying to help them out and make sure they get the right information. So if we hadn't told them they moved out of the office, I mean, it's almost transparent in that way. So it really was, Slack has been the main one. There are the Zoom calls that they can connect with as well. We haven't had to adjust their shrinkage as much. We've actually seen shrinkages be able to increase because their out of office shrinkage has gone away really. So that means that they can continue to do their coachings, their meetings and everything as long as they're planning those out. There's actually a little bit more room in the budget to do that. And it really is just happened to work out really well because we were in that position, but just making everything as location agnostic as possible, I think helps out in these kind of situations.
Great. We're out of time. I didn't even make it through half of the questions I wanted to ask. So thanks for everyone for their time, but especially to Nick, Shelton, and Adrien for imparting your wisdom on us. We hope this has been interesting to the broader support-driven community and would love to continue the conversation over email or maybe even another show. We can take the show on the road maybe. But until then, I hope you're all staying safe out there and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Brian, and everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.